Hey folks, I'm going to give you a tutorial on how to upgrade your Redwood project from .36 to .37. And let's first look at the release notes, and you'll usually find them on the Redwood repo over here, and on the right, you have all of the releases listed here. So let's click through and you will see the upgrade notes on version 37. There's a lot that has changed in this version, a lot of GraphQL goodness that's gone in. So do take your time to read through these release notes just to understand what's going in and what you might have to change in your project. But for most projects, it will be a relatively simple upgrade process. There's a lot of changes, but we have written code mods this time for you. So you should be able to run a few commands and it'll upgrade your project for you. I'll run through that in this video. Um, I'm going to skip over the changelog and these sections, but do take your time to read through them. The major change this time is that we are replacing Apollo GraphQL Server for GraphQL Helix and Envelope from the guild. That's our default GraphQL server now. So to support that, we have a couple of changes that you have to do in terms of imports that we're going to see in a moment, but also we're bringing in directives, and that's going to give you a lot of power to control what gets queried and modifying your responses. I think you're going to love what directives do. So bear with me and we'll go through the upgrade guide and we'll see what it's like to use the latest Redwood. So to find the upgrade notes, this time is a little bit different in that we have linked it into a separate post over here, the upgrade guide, which links to our forums, the Redwood community. And that's just because the upgrade notes or the breaking changes here are a little bit longer than usual, but don't be worried about the length of this. It's actually fairly simple once you get through it, as you'll see. Let's run through the version 37 upgrade guide step by step. So the first thing we're going to do make sure you read each of these steps to understand what's going on. But to keep this video short and simple, I'll pretty much copy paste each of these steps and we'll be good to go. So the first step is to add GraphQL server as a dependency. Now, copy and paste that over. But something to note is that in this particular project, I actually already had GraphQL server here. And that's because we opted in to use the GraphQL server while it was in beta. So if your project is similar, it'll look like this, but most likely you might not even have a GraphQL server dependency. But once you've upgraded, it'll show up with the newer version 37 version there. This particular version of Redwood.js API will upgrade at the end, or you can do up front. It doesn't actually matter what order you do it in. So let's commit this. So the next step is to upgrade or change the syntax in API source functions GraphQL. So let's go have a look at the GraphQL function. You can see that I'm already importing from GraphQL server. So the code mods will be a little bit different on this project. They'll work a little bit different, but it will get us there 90% of the way. But if you've opted in to the GraphQL server from before, just follow what I'm doing. But it should be fairly simple to figure out as it runs. Now, while this runs, I'm going to show you how to use this document as well effectively, because for each of the automatic code mod steps, what you get is this collapsible that shows you exactly what changes and what it should look like in the end. And you can see here it's saying we only need the create GraphQL handler. And once that's run, it says it's done, but you can see that we had these extra imports here, which we don't really need. So let's save that and remove these extra imports. Um, if your project had imports from Redwood.js API, this you wouldn't need to do this, but it's only if you opted in that you need to do this extra step. So that's done. Let's have a look at the diff. It all looks fine to me. It's added the directives here, like it suggested here, SDLs, services. Great. So that step's done. Let's commit. Great. Now let's run the next step. We need to make sure we update the imports for errors and context. So let's have a quick look what it's doing. It's saying that we need to make sure that authentication error, for example, is imported from Redwood.js API, from Redwood.js GraphQL server, not from API. That's great, but we'll use the automatic code mods again, and let's run that. And just wait for it to finish and we'll look at the diff because there's likely to be multiple files that have changed. Yep, it looks like it's changed so that it imports authentication and forbidden error from GraphQL server and not from API, which is what we want. Great. So let's commit this. Now we need to enable secure services. And this is the major feature we're enabling by default as part of Redwood. We're going to do pretty much the same as we've done earlier. We're going to copy these code mods, that command, and run the code mod. While that's running, I'm going to take a look what it's meant to do. So what it's saying is that it's going to create a new directory in API source directives. So right now in API source, there's no directives folder, but as soon as it finishes executing, there we go. We see that it adds the directives folder, and inside directives, there's require auth. Yeah, and that's working great. You'll notice that it has this extension problem here. Because this is a JavaScript project, what we actually want to do is make sure um, the extensions are correct as well. You likely won't have to do this by the time you upgrade. We'll probably have published a fix by then, but it's just worth noting that these automated code mods, they're not always 100%, but it'll get you there very, very close. There we go. So let's do the same again. We looked at the diff. These are the files that got added, and we can see that it's matching the folder structure, API source directives, which is great. Now let's do the manual step of adding require auth and skip auth directives to our SDLs. What I'm going to do on this project at the moment is I'll show you an example of how to do one, and then after we do the upgrade, we're going to do the rest because personally I prefer the warnings that we get afterwards. So I'll show you how that works, and you don't have to get everything right as you upgrade. You can always test it at the end. So let's look at this user SDL. What we have to do is make sure in each of these SDLs, all of the queries and the mutations have at least require auth or skip auth on the query or the mutation fields. So how do you know which one to add, right? So the best way to do that is to find the matching service. So in this case, I was looking at users SDL. Now let's look at the users service, and you can see that we have require auth roles admin here. Not only do you need require auth, but you also need to check for the role admin lowercase here. So once you remove it, what you can do is instead add this into your SDL. So you give it require auth, and remember, we need to give it roles as well, right? And roles takes an array of strings. So admin lowercase, just to match what we had before. So if I do a diff now, it makes it a little bit clearer. So it used to have require auth with the role admin in lowercase here. And what we want to do is go into the SDL and also add require auth on roles admin. The reason I recommend doing one, or maybe doing this step after you run the upgrade command, is because you actually get a little bit of help from the dev server, which we'll see. So I'm just going to do one now, and then after we upgrade, I'm going to show what it looks like with the errors and do the rest together. Moving on, let's now do the next step, which is upgrade our scenario syntax. So let's have a quick look at what the change is. So it looks like it used to be this format, and now it nests that data in a data key. So let's have a look at our scenario here, and you can see that the scenario doesn't have the data attribute. So we'll run the automatic code mod. And you can see it's done the upgrade. It doesn't format it 100% correctly, but if once you save, it'll format it for you. Prettier will do that for you. Once again, let's go have a look at the diff. And you can see that it has added the data attribute inside one here, which is great. So let's commit this, update scenario syntax. And we move on to the next step. Moving on to the next step, we want to update forms to use the new form of coercion that we've added in version 37. And this API matches how React Hook Form does coercion and changes some of the property names, such as validation and config. So just like before, let's run this command here. Done, and it's modified 2 files, as we can see here. Now let's go have a look at what files it modified. It modified post form, so let's open that up. Okay, so there are some formatting errors which went away once I saved, and let's also open contact page. You can see there's formatting errors here, so let's save that and it should go away. And let's now do a diff between the two after the changes, just so that we can see what it changed. So we could see that it used to have this validation prop, and now it's renamed it to config, which is what we're expecting to see after the code mod. Let's take a look at what else has changed here. You can see that there used to be a transform value here, but now it's nested this transform value as well as a property in validation, which is great. And this brings us in line with how React Hook Forms is doing coercion now. So that all looks great to me. So let's do our commit again, update form coercion syntax. Let's open up API source lib auth. That's where your getCurrentUser function exists. And yeah, I guess we need to do this check. This is something to just make sure that your getCurrentUser function is a little bit more secure. So all we have to do is add that if statement, because it looks like we're not doing anything different here. So I'm going to add these things here, remove the comments, and we're good to go. Now this project doesn't use Firebase, so there's no point me updating Firebase, and it doesn't use dbauth, so there's no point in updating here. But if your project does, definitely read through and you have to make a few small modifications. And finally, there is, of course, the final step of running yarn RW upgrade. And once you do that, it will have upgraded all of your dependencies. I'm going to commit this before it finishes. And there we go. Remember, we didn't fully add require auth and skip auth to all of the queries and mutations. We're going to make sure we do that in this next step. This should be the final step in our upgrade process. We did all of the changes in updated the GraphQL server. We changed the imports, how it's called in GraphQL.js, like that. We enabled secure services by adding the directives and only added require auth to one query. So we need to do the rest. And if we scroll down a bit more, we updated scenarios to use the new syntax. We updated forms to use the new syntax for coercion. We modified getCurrentUser. And we skipped F and G because we don't use either Firebase or dbauth. So that's all done. Now, next step is to just make sure that we can run our project successfully. So let's run yarn rw dev. And remember, we actually upgraded this project to version 37 just a second ago. And there we go. We see an error telling us all of the queries and all of the mutations where we missed adding require auth or skip auth. And these are required directives on your SDLs. As I said before, sometimes it's easy to miss these directives, and that's why we add a build time check, just to make sure that you've intentionally skipping auth on queries and mutations, because it's easy to make that error and forget it. So let's find our contacts query. It should be in contacts SDL, and we can see that there's no directive here. So like before, we want to open up the contact service and then just check. Okay, so contacts, it doesn't look like it needs auth at the moment. So I'm going to follow that logic and add skip auth here. And you can see you get autocomplete as you type. This is also helpful once you've upgraded, it gives you this. Next, query for posts and post. So let's do the same. Let's open up post SDL, find query, there it is. And you can see there's no directives. So let's open it up, post service. And let's look at posts and post. Neither of these things require auth, it looks like. I'm going to say skip auth and skip auth. But I also noticed that there were some mutations in this file. So let's do the mutations while we're in this file as well. And if we look here, there's create post, update post, and delete post with no directives on it. So let's go back to the post service. I'm going to put this side by side just to help us understand a little bit exactly what we need to change. So let's find the create post one, and you can see that we need to require auth here. Now, just because we're using directives doesn't mean you can't call require auth in your service anymore. This is still valid syntax. So if you prefer in your service to validate auth, you can do that. So if you wanted in create post, I could say skip auth here, or more accurately, require auth here, but you don't need to specify the roles to check here. But instead, you want to check it in the service. Yeah, that's totally fine. But I think for me, it makes a little bit more sense to check the roles in the SDL. There are cases where you might not want to do that, but let's go have a look at what these roles are. And you can see it's an array of admin, author, and publisher. So let me grab that, which is create post roles. Yeah. And then let's add it into the roles here. Okay. What it's complaining about is that in SDL, you need double quotes. Do that. Great. So create post is now done. I'm going to remove the create post roles from here, just so that it's easier for me to track the changes I'm doing manually. Then we go to update post, and let's look at update post roles. And we're going to grab this, and it looks like it's the same as we did before. And this is update post, I believe. Yeah. So let's require auth roles. Let's put this in. And then let's remember to change to double quotes so that it doesn't complain. Nice. So that one's done. Great. Let's remove require auth from update post. And finally, delete post, which takes admin and publisher. Let's remove that. And you can see it requires auth. Let's remove that. Great. So we've done that. Let's remember to add it here. Roles. Let's change the syntax. Be double quotes. And there we go. So those posts are done. Now we need to update user metadata, user profiles. So this is great. Posts are done. User SDL. Oh, okay, it's user metadata. So user metadata, SDL, and we can see there's no directive here. Let's go have a look at the service. It's just require auth for both user metadata and update metadata. So let's do one by one. We remove that, add require auth here, and we also have this mutation listed here. So let's add require auth here, and we can remove require auth from update user metadata. Since we don't need require auth in this file anymore, I'm going to delete that. And finally, I believe we did metadata. No, there are a couple more actually. So there's user profiles SDL. Here, I'm just going to be require auth likely. User profiles skip auth. Okay. Great. and user roles. That's the query. And it looks like there's no off on this either, so we want to skip off. Great. So we've done all of these. It looks like it's all fine. I had the dev server running, so it's actually running constantly to tell me what I missed, and it looks like I missed the create contact mutation. So if I go to contact SDL, we modified the query, but I guess I forgot the mutation. Yeah, there we go. And let's open up contacts services. And we're looking for create contact. So create contact, it doesn't require off. So all we need to do is skip off. Once that's done, collect, take a look. There we go. There's one other error here. It's saying cannot find GraphQL server logger. And that's because this project opted in to the old way of using GraphQL server. So this is another important step where if you did opt in, you need to make sure that everything GraphQL gets imported from GraphQL server. But logger can get imported from API because it's not specific to the GraphQL endpoints. That's the general rule of thumb for updating imports. And that should be it. And we're up and running. That's all. Catch you later, folks.